Oscar Piastri made a statement in Spa. He was absolutely killing Sector 2 in both qualifying and sprint shootout. He topped the leaderboard in Q2, so let's find out how he managed to deliver such a performance. And we will compare his SQ2 lap with Charles Leclerc, who was P3 in that session. I wanted to compare him with Carlos Sainz, who was P2, but Carlos's onboard was from a driver eye camera, and different camera angles are not so good for comparison. So we will compare him to the next best driver, Charles Leclerc. Track is just dry enough for slicks, no further info, let's start. And from the get-go we see that starting speed of Oscar was awful in comparison to Charles Leclerc. So from the start he should lose a little bit of speed, and we see Charles will brake a tiny bit earlier than Oscar Piastri, but I still think that considering the speed difference he could brake a little bit later. So they brake, they enter the corner, and here a huge difference. Oscar completely misses the apex. Yes, maybe he tries to avoid the rubber on the inside, because the rubber should be on a dry racing line, but at this stage I think that it's already dry enough to actually stay on a classical racing line, which Leclerc pretty much does. And we also see his car being well better rotated towards the exit of the corner, so Charles will have a way better exit. You see the speed difference. Oscar had to go off the throttle at the exit, and moving forward towards the exit of the corner we already see a huge difference. Charles is winning one car or maybe car and a half on Oscar, so we already drag Oscar towards Charles. Now shots are synchronized, and let's move on to Orouge Radion. We enter Orouge. Now Charles is being already ahead of Oscar due to a better exit of turn 1 and maybe due to a higher top speed, but he's tiny bit off the throttle. The exact situation when your right foot plays some tricks with your mind. But let's move on. Radion, actually good lines from both the drivers, and now we actually finish this sector 1. Not the best personal sector from Charles, but he is still 3/10 up on Piastri. But now we enter the sector of brilliance, a sector where no one could get even close to Oscar throughout both qualifying sessions. We synchronize shots, we see them braking at the same moment. And sector 2 is all about these fast middle speed corners. Pretty similar throttle work from both drivers, and from now on Leclerc is actually again a bit ahead, so we drag Oscar forward for the third time, but from now on the magic will start. Check it out. First of all, Oscar is practically lifting coasting. He is first going off the throttle, only then ends the brake pressure. They brake, they enter the corner, and we see Oscar being wider on the track. He was later with his entry point, but I wanna draw your attention to this forming dry line. The main thing is that regular racing line goes somewhere like this. This line is inefficient in wet or drying conditions, and the fact that we see a dry line forming on an optimal wet trajectory means that most of the drivers understand the concept of racing under the rain. It is a huge progress in terms of overall level of drivers, because maybe just 5-6 years ago only a couple of drivers on the racing grid really understood this concept, and usually the dry line was forming on a classical racing line, meaning that even in wet conditions most of the drivers were choosing the wrong line. A nice thing to see, but let's move on. See them both making a regular wet line, and Oscar being way faster with his minimal speed throughout the corner. A bit of an oversteer from Charles, and from now on. Such a late braking from Oscar in this corner is actually mind-blowing for me, because all three drivers that made mistakes in turn 9, Esteban Ocon, Kevin Magnussen and Lance Stroll, all of them were braking way earlier than Oscar Piastri here, but still didn't manage to make the corner. And I remind you that those are laps from Q2, so the same conditions to Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon mistakes. Now, check the smoothness of steering wheel work. Oscar is way ahead now. He gained a huge amount of time in the build-up for this corner, and his minimal speed is just mind-blowing. And we see this huge difference. Oscar is already here, so we need to drag Charles towards him and move on to turn 10. Now, one more surprising thing. Charles Leclerc is in love with trail braking. But for this fast corner, he brakes way earlier than Oscar. He starts his braking on a straight steering wheel, while Oscar already turns in but still goes full throttle. So Oscar uses way more trail braking than Charles Leclerc. Huge difference in minimal speed. Yes, Charles has more throttle opened right now, but he needs it in order to just compensate on exit. And we see him being able to compensate, but Oscar still wins a lot on the entry of the corner. Beautiful driving from him. Just like in turn 8, we see Oscar a bit lifting coasting through here. It means that he is so smooth with his inputs. His mind is so well connected with his car, we can feel it even from the onboard. So, perfect example of a trail braking, huge speed difference once again, and pretty much similar picture to all these medium high speed corners, nearly 20 km/h difference. And once again we have to drag Charles a bit forward. The only corner where Charles was braking later than Oscar, but it may be due to a higher speed of Oscar entering the corner. So the brake, once again Oscar carries way more speed throughout the corner, Charles is earlier on a throttle, and Oscar is still faster on the exit, 48.4. In this session no other driver was able to even break into 49 in a second sector. In SQ3 Oscar was still holding the best sector too, so his performance is quite remarkable. But now we move on to sector 3. Tiny lift from Charles once again. And we enter this long straight. And now we're starting to see some huge difference in top speed, nearly 10 km/h. And a huge, I mean enormous difference in braking point. So despite the difference in top speed, Oscar is actually ahead at the apex of a penultimate corner. Now we move on to last corner, and Oscar made a mistake in the middle of chicane, which should be quite costly for him. And we see Charles being way faster exiting the last corner. So Charles is faster on sector 3 by 0.3 of a second, and I deliberately brought out this track map for you to show you some tendencies. Sector 3 consists mainly of this huge straight and a low speed corner. Ferrari was faster there pretty much consistently. Now once again a straight and once again a low speed corner where Oscar was slower. Now straight, Orush Radion, which was on pair, and then straight once again. But now Oscar dominated this whole sector, consisting of medium and high speed corners. It looks like his setup is maximum downforce, at least in comparison to everyone else, which might be a problem for him in a race, and which also may explain such an outstanding performance. This is it, thank you very much, leave your like, subscribe to the channel if you like this breakdown, leave a comment if you agree or disagree or have something to add or to complain. Stay tuned.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey.